Ideas change the world, and AI is accelerating the transformation of humanity's future in profound ways. And it is opening up new frontiers. It is vital to bring forward the best of human intelligence to shape the creation of artificial intelligence. If humanity is going to solve its greatest challenges, we need AI, and we need an open discussion on ethics, transparency, possibilities, technology, challenges, and opportunities. This program brings together the brightest minds from around the world, not just for the future, but these digital pioneers share actionable steps for right now.
So today we are honored to welcome Mr. Morton Davis, owner and chairman of D.H. Blair Investment Banking Corp., a New York City investment bank established in 1904, which specializes in financing emerging growth companies. As an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Mr. Davis has raised more than $3 billion for over 400 companies. After graduating from the Harvard Business School, Mr. Davis headed to Wall Street, and through his hard work, discipline, and entrepreneurship skills, he became widely known as a Wall Street investment banker, an entrepreneur who has created countless number of jobs and have added exciting new products in biotech and healthcare industry, unique electronics and telecommunications products, and have resulted in immeasurable productivity to the American economy. Today, very few people on the Wall Street possess such rare brand of financial expertise that he has. We're excited to welcome Mr. Davis to our Digital Pioneers Dialogues. And joining us on this discussion are my co-hosts, Gen Z Angelica and AI Mark. So with this said, I'll pass it on to them to open up the dialogue and share their opening thoughts. Angelica, to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angelina, for this. Well, first of all, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome a true legend of the investment banking world here in our dialogue today. It is truly humbling experience for all of us. And we will be covering a vast expanse of territory, from Gen Z to your personal story, the future of digital and artificial intelligence, and actionable insights, of course. And myself, coming from the younger generational perspective, I will be engaging in today's dialogue on the topics of social impact investing and its implications for our future digital economy. Your insights, of course, on what the biggest challenges are for the youth living in this incredibly hyper-connected reality, and your recommendations on how we can succeed in this new digital horizon. So with this in mind, now, Mark, I pass on the microphone to you to dive more into the biography of our esteemed guest.
Thank you very much, Angelica and Angelina. Again, we're so privileged and honored today to have with us J. Morton Davis, a legendary financial wizard and owner and chairman of D.H. Blair Investment Banking Company in New York. And we want to explore today what the future looks like, what the Morton has seen over a period of many years in terms of challenges and also opportunities for United States and the world. We're going through a challenging time, pandemic in our country, but there's also a lot of lessons for us to learn on resilience. And what Morty could share with us is his definition of resilience. He'll share with us some successes and interests of some of the companies that he has invested in the past. He'll share with us some of the interesting insights on finance and what the younger population and everybody could learn from the best practices and sound advice. And also, where is innovation and technology going in the United States, Israel, many countries, and what's the our roadmap is that we are looking at, which is going to be combining the financial management and sound advice, as well as also technology and all the interesting startups right now. Many of the startups that Morton Davis has invested heavily in the past, and now he's seeing a different direction, a different wave. We're not talking about now a red wave or blue wave, where we're talking about a wave of startups and startup innovation hitting across the United States and the world in zones. And we are interested to explore this conversation. As Angelina already mentioned, Morton Davis has established this tremendous bank back in 1904 as one of the lead investors in many of the entrepreneurial and growth companies. He's been involved as a banker, as an entrepreneur, as an investment analyst, as an economist, as a venture capitalist. He is what Wall Street is, Wall Street personified. As Angelina mentioned, 400 companies, ladies and gentlemen, more than $3 billion over the years have created endless amount of jobs and opportunities through many innovations, many innovative products in telecommunications, and improving competitiveness and productivity for America's economy, improving the image of Wall Street and creating this rare brand, this knowledge of the financial expertise blended for their job creations and other successes. Morton Davis has served on the board of Research America, Foundation for Future Generation, Freedom Foundation of Valley Forge. He has served on the board of trustees of Yeshiva University and board of Sims School of Business. Mr. Davis is a recipient of the number of prestigious awards and honors, including the Synagogue Council of America's Covenant Peace Award, the Republican Party's Distinguished Service Award, the Interpret Museum Freedom Award, too many to list. In 2011, International Center for Autism Research and Education honored Mr. Davis' Lifetime of Achievements in special tribute luncheon in the U.S. Capitol. In 1971, Mr. Davis and his wife made a gift to the Mount Sinai School of Medicine to endow first-year merit medical scholarships every year for the needy first-year students. Over the years, this endowment has grown, and recently 3 Worthy medical students have been recipients of the Generous Scholarship Award. Mr. Davis has written 2 business books. The most recent one, and I encourage everybody to get it on Amazon and other places, From Hard Knocks to Hot Stocks, receiving incredible, flattering reviews from some of the most America's prominent business economic leaders, including Senator Bob Dole, Alan Ace Greenberg, Carl Icahn, Donald Trump, Larry King. Mr. Davis' earliest book, Making America Work Again, it will become, people are listening and are saying it sounds similar, was acclaimed by a number of notable economic scholars, in addition to being praised by President Ronald Reagan, one of my most favorite presidents, that I would say, in tribute to Mr. Davis, where he gave a great accolade, and Mr. President Reagan recognized Mr. Davis' long career of hard work and his support of the creative arts. Mr. Davis has also published a recent book on achieving happiness in life. What good is it when you make all this money and you're not happy? It's called Happiness Guaranteed Over or Your Misery Back. Mr. Davis is a member of Phi Beta Kappa and has received his AB in economics, magna cum laude from Brooklyn College, and his MBA with distinction from Harvard School of Business in 1959. He resides in New York with his lovely wife, and he's never far away from his 4 daughters, the many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We're so privileged to have you to have this conversation today. And with this, I'll pass this on to Angelica for the first question.
Excellent, Mark. What an incredible introduction from everybody. And now we'll dive in right with Gen Z question. So for the younger audience that's tuning in today, it would be incredible for us to learn more about your background, of course, and your journey to becoming truly one of our nation's leading investment bankers. So if you would like to elaborate more on your personal story, we would absolutely love to hear it.
Mark, Angelica and Angelina, and whoever else is there, I think there's some of the male involved. Mark, your brilliant and charismatic colleagues did such a great job. I don't know if I could add anything. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. And before I start, I want to tell you it was very difficult for me to get here on time because I had to go all the way from my kitchen to my living room. And so it took me I just made it by 12 o'clock. But I have to tell you, in that light, there was once a time when the Pope arrived in New York at Kennedy Airport. I'll be serious in a minute, but this is an interesting story. The Pope arrived at Kennedy Airport and he ran up to a taxi cab driver and he said, I got to get to the Waldorf Astoria in 20 minutes. The cab driver says, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean you can't do it? I got to get there in time late. He says, no, I can't do it. And he takes out his license. He says, look, this is my license. I got all these marks. If I drive you there within 20 minutes, I'll have to do 100 miles an hour on the Van Wyck Expressway. I'll have to take all kind of risks. I'll lose my license. So the Pope, as we know, being so understanding and sympathetic, says to the driver, he says, you know what? I'll give you a big tip. I don't want you to lose your license. I'll drive. You sit in the back. And the cab driver says, okay. So he starts. The Pope gets up front and drives, and the cab driver is sitting in the back, and the Pope is doing 100 miles an hour, zigzagging in and out. All of a sudden, you hear a siren. Ah! The cop stops him. You lunatic! What are you doing? You were going over 100 miles an hour. You were endangering all the people around on the highway here. I got to talk to the chief. So he calls the chief. Chief, I caught this guy doing over 100 miles an hour on a Van Wyck Expressway. He was going in and out. What do I hit him with? He said, what a question. Hit him with the book. Hit him with speeding. Hit him with reckless endangerment. Hit him with everything. He says, I can't. He said, what do you mean you can't? He says, this guy's big. He says, big? Is it the mayor? He says, no, bigger than the mayor. Wow. Is it the governor? No, bigger than the governor. Is it the president? No, bigger than the president. He says, who the hell's bigger than the president? I don't know, but the Pope is his driver. Okay.
That's a very nice story. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Okay.
It's lovely to hear that.
I hope I didn't mess up the Pope's reputation. Anyway, to start off with, my bio is really should be an inspiration for anybody who's a real loser, because in my early life I was persecuted, beaten up, and dropped out of school when I was 14. I was born in 1929. If you remember, that's when the crash came. It was a very bad year. My father said it was a terrible year because I was born, and I was. They tell me I was a failed abortion, but they were trying to still abort me when I was 14. Anyway, I was beaten up by my rabbis, who had arrived from Poland and Russia recently and couldn't get jobs, and it was the height of the Depression. Everybody was depressed, so they were frustrated. My father was frustrated. He wouldn't work on Saturday. He was very religious. In those days, you had to work on Saturday. And some of the kids in the neighborhood that saw me with a skull cap on, with a yarmulke, beat me up because in those days, they said I killed Jesus. And I swore to them I didn't do it. and at my yeshiva, my Hebrew school, they never told us who Jesus was. So I really thought they were under the wrong impression. But anyway, I was 5, I was getting beaten up. So at 14, I dropped out of school completely. And I hated God, I hated religion, I hated anything to do with school. But the only thing that remained with me that I was indoctrinated with was a respect for learning. So I went back of my own volition. I was hung out in a pool room all day. I went uptown to see all kind of movies and stage shows. But at night, I registered for high school in a school that was in the Bed-Stuy section of Brooklyn. It was dangerous to go there. In those days, nobody had guns, but they had shivs in their boots, long knives in their boots. And it was really frightening. There was a lot of crime in that area. And I registered in Central Girls High. At night, in the daytime, it was all girls. At night, it was co-ed. But my high school diploma says my name, and it says the graduate of Central Girls High. My kids often ask me, and my grandkids, whether I'm a transvestite or something, because they don't know how I got a degree from Central Girls High. But anyway, I finished school high school when I was about 20, 21, because it took a long time at night. And by the time I finished school and went to college, I was married and had 3 kids real quickly. I got married in 1950, so I married 78, what is it, 69, 70 years, 1950, 70 years, the same wife. She tolerated me because at 25, we went to the doctor and she accompanied me. And the doctor said, with your husband's disease, he has ulcerative colitis, there's no way he's going to make it till 30. But my wife figured till 30, she'll sweat it out. I was 25 at that time. Ever since I reached 30, every morning she says, damn it, have you reached 30 yet? So she's been suffering through these additional 65 years or so, but she's the best wife in the world. And she and I took Hillary Clinton seriously because she said it takes a village. And all my 4 daughters lived within a block here, and my 30 grandchildren live within very close, also within this complex. And we now have, I lost count, somewhere over 50 grandchildren and counting. So we developed our own village. If we bring a vote to anybody, they win in a landslide. So it should be uplifting and encouraging for young people who get disappointed and depressed with their progress to see that, I was a total loser till my brother went to Harvard, to Brooklyn College, which in those days was totally free if you had good grades. I didn't have good grades, so I had to pass the first 30 credit with a B or higher. And I did much better than that because it was very important for me to get tuition free. So after the first 30 credits, I went to Brooklyn College, tuition free. I proceeded to do very well because my brother, who was younger than me and never dropped out, attended a class, an economics class, and the professor announced one day that the average student at a Harvard Business School in those days makes $25,000 a year. 10 years out, $25,000 a year. That's more impressive than if somebody would tell you today the average student of Harvard Business School 10 years out makes $25 million. Because nobody had any money. If somebody had $10,000, we considered them a millionaire. So from that day forward, my brother decided he's going to Harvard Business School, and ultimately went. He was rejected the first time he applied. He went to Columbia to get a master's in economics, and then he got accepted. He graduated top of his class, and then got a doctorate and became a professor at Harvard Business School and MIT. I studied. I had 3 kids. I locked them out. I sat in front of a wall and just studied and studied so I could get straight A's. And then ultimately, I went to Harvard Business School and graduated with distinction. And I have to tell you, before I went to Harvard Business School, I was maybe not totally retarded, but semi-retarded. Because I went for interviews, I didn't know how to dress, I didn't know how. My brother got me he became a estate planner for Aetna Life. And he set up an appointment for me with the head of their vice chairman, because I wanted a job just like my brother, sit in an office, a warm office, because all the jobs I had from the time I was 14 were miserable. I was delivering milk door to door at 5 o'clock in the morning in a wagon, and my teeth were chattering. I had to use a searchlight. It was so dark to see the addresses. And at the end of the week, I hardly got paid because in those days, we only had milk bottles and they froze, and he took off the bottles that broke from my salary. And then I did all kind of door-to-door selling. In the summer, it was hot and I sweated. In the winter, I froze and I had an old car that broke down all the time. So I went through a very hard time. So I wanted to work in a warm office with a pencil and pad. I wanted it so desperately that one time there was an advertisement that said, good handwriting required, office job. So I got up early. I was like the third online, and the fellow who was interviewing me, he said, write down your name and write this sentence. So I did. He says, young man, I'm going to do you the biggest favor for the rest of your life. When it says good handwriting required, sleep late, sleep through the day, because I couldn't even pass penmanship in my, even today I have to ask my secretaries what I wrote. So I went for this interview and with this guy, and he said, now, to tell you how backward I was, I had black shoes and white socks, and he said, what would you like for lunch? He took me to a fancy Wall Street restaurant called White's. He said, what would you like? And I ordered a tuna fish sandwich on toast. And then I started to use a knife and fork to cut the sandwich open. And he said, look, it's all right, lift up the sandwich. You can lift it up with your hands. So I learned something, but that was my state of development. And he said, no, I won't give you a job as like your brothers, not in an office, but if you wanna, I'll hire you as a salesman. So I said, how come? He said, well, you know, we have several thousand salesmen in our organization, but out of the top 10, 6 are Jewish. So you guys have something in your genes that make you good salesmen, so I would hire you. But I didn't want to do that, so I turned it down. Anyway, that was my early life.
Thank you very much, Morty. What an interesting story. And I want to expand on this story. You mentioned growing up, a rocky childhood. You mentioned growing up in Brooklyn. Brooklyn today is what a different place, very cosmopolitan, and so many immigrants around the world. They end up in Brooklyn and they start a life. You went to a yeshiva Orthodox school, as you mentioned. It was growing up in the height of depression with 25% unemployment, leaving school. This was a challenging time. And when you think about those challenging years that you were mentioning, what kind of guidance can you provide to us that from this experience in respect to resilience that we need now in the times of COVID? And another part of that question, you touched upon Harvard Business School. And again, it was a very difficult time in our history, especially for a population of Jewish descent getting into Harvard Business School and then getting into the banking business, which was also very difficult. How did you overcome all of this? And how did you manage to get into the Harvard Business School, quite an Ivy League institution, and then establishing a successful banking business? What can you share with us, and specifically related to the tough environment which exists right now when people are saying, oh, I can't get a job, or I'm struggling right now and I want this marketing job now as I'm finishing university, and it's just I want this to be a chief marketing officer. And I wanted your perspective of how do you have to do it slowly, but how do you navigate through those challenging times?
Well, first of all, the most important single thing that helped me was going and getting an education, and particularly Harvard Business School. Because before I entered Harvard, I tried to get jobs on Wall Street, and nobody even took me seriously because I didn't make a good impression. I didn't have any worthwhile resume. So the first thing I would tell everyone that wants to enhance their future and move ahead in life is to get a good education. Doesn't mean that you have to go to Harvard Business School, and some people never even went to college. But the book I wrote was the last book, or the one before that, is From Hard Knocks to Hot Stocks, and it was really the hard knocks that helped me as well as the education. Larry King, in discussing this book, said, excuse me one second. Larry King said, this is the best book I've ever read on making it big. You're in the hands of a master, enjoy. And Donald Trump said, Morty Davis has written a chronicle of great triumphs. It is full of intriguing speculation and clear insights, provocative, challenging, and enlightening, and written by a unique man who really knows the score a must-read. And then Senator Bob Dole, who ran for president, wrote a nice praise endorsement, and Ace Greenberg, the head of Bear Stearns, and so many others, Paul Icahn. So again, the first thing that I would advise all young people is get role models and see what they do, see how they do it, and imitate them, and get the best education you can. Even if you start late, like I did, it's never too late. And don't be afraid of failure, and be entrepreneurial. You know, they asked Edison, how come you didn't give up? You failed so many times. They say you failed over 1,000 times. He said, what are you talking about? I never failed once. He said, 1,000 times I succeeded in finding out what didn't work. So that's the attitude you have to have. And the Chinese have the same word for opportunity and adversity and opportunity. Out of adversity comes opportunity. So anytime you let down, learn from the disappointments, learn from the experience.
Thank you for this response, Morty. You know, you spoke about lifetime learning, education, never giving up. I want to go back a little bit more and deep dive. Your first job was at Shields as a broker in New York. You really learned, as I was talking with you, to really focus and work hard, not giving up, work very hard to achieve the results. Then you founded D.H. Blair. You raised billions of dollars, took 400 plus companies public. From all of this, what are some lessons that come in your mind that you could share with us based on this journey that you had?
Yeah, I just want to correct one fact that you just mentioned, and that is that I founded the company. The company, I'm old, but the company was founded in 1904, so I wasn't yet able to found it. But I joined a company that was already founded, and initially I became a 1% partner because I made such a big impression on Wall Street in my first 2 years. So I got a lot of offers from Goldman Sachs, from other, 3 or 4 other companies, and I became a partner in those days, which was a big deal. But Shields, when they hired me, the head of the management, in charge of management, was the former head of Price Waterhouse, a guy named Walters. I'm not sure, John Walters or something. Anyway, he said to me, you know, we've never had a Jewish partner, and you have the kind of background, you could be our first Jewish partner. We'd like to put you in management, give you your own office, and manage all the brokers and all the bankers there. So that sounded terrific. I didn't want to be a salesman again. And once I took the job, I was working about 6 months, 8 months, and they started me with what they thought was a high salary because I had 3 kids. So they started me with $7,200 a year, which is phenomenal because they started most of the others at $4,000 a year. So $7,200 in 59 was good money. Anyway, what happened was I was in management, and management turned out to be, all the brokers brought me their headaches, all their aggravation. I had to resolve it, and they were making big money. I watched every guy that was making tremendous money on a commission basis. So I decided I don't want to be a manager anymore. I went down and spoke to the chairman of the company, and I said, I'd like to be in sales. I'd like to be a broker. And since I was 30 years old when I got out of Harvard with 3 kids, I said I got to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard to catch up to the others. And so I worked day and night. You know, the only time we used to be able to do cold calls. So I called all day. I never took a coffee break. There was a room where the other people, the brokers, went for a coffee break. They went to eat lunch. I took no breaks. I told my secretary, order me a sandwich. And while I was on the phone, I took bites. And the only reason I stopped calling was when I called at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, somebody would say to me, you have a hell of a lot of nerve calling at this hour. So I realized it was late and I didn't call. But I went in Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, and after the first year and a half, out of 1,000 brokers, I was number 2 in the whole organization. And Wall Street's a small place, and everybody hears about this superstar salesman. And I had no connections. I had no wealthy friends or anything, but I built a great following. So, and I changed my name then because when I got on the phone, I went through Harvard as Morty Davidowitz. I got on the phone, I said, hi, this is Morty Davidowitz. I want to tell you about a fantastic stock, a great special situation. They said, what? What's that, Davidowitz? I spent all my time spelling my name, pronouncing my name, So I finally said, I'll use Davis. And till this day, I never changed it officially. But nobody ever asked me again the spelling. They once asked me, was I related to Sammy Davis Jr., who was a one-eyed black entertainer, fabulous entertainer. He was buddies with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, part of the Rat Pack. And not only didn't he have enough trouble being one-eyed and black, he converted to Judaism. He didn't have enough trouble.
Excellent, Morty. Thank you so much for your background.
Working that hard makes it easy to, as a matter of fact, Ronald Reagan, when he talked about my book, and it says, Making America Work Again. So he held up the book and he said, actually, Mark has the video. It's about a 2-minute video of Reagan talking about me and my book. And he said, Morty Davis proves that working hard is gratifying and rewarding, something to that effect. So all I could say is that's in my bio in Who's Who in America, they asked me for my favorite quote, and I say, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
I absolutely believe in everything you're saying. This is a message that we have to echo to the younger generation for them to become more resilient and prepared. And now I want to bring it back to the Gen Z topic. So a big subject recently has been this whole realm of impact investing and social impact, which Generation Z is largely champions of. So according to Impactivate, roughly a quarter of respondents to a 2017 survey by the Global Impact Investing Network said that they had seen significant progress over the last 3 years in impact management research, tools, and understanding. Now, obviously, recent events like COVID and civil unrest have prompted increased momentum in impact investing as well. So because Gen Z is so purpose-driven and so social impact-oriented, how do you personally think this is going to affect the impact investing landscape, if it will at all? I would be curious to hear your take.
I love the attitude of the Gen Z generation. They're fabulous. This desire to make an impact, to me, is more important than all the money they could make. Because even in my own efforts, I funded companies. Most of the companies I funded at least half, were related to medical research firms and companies that were attempting to find cures. I did an IPO for Jonas Salk, who got the Nobel Prize for developing this Salk vaccine that eliminated polio. And I funded all sorts of brilliant, up-and-coming young people who were driven, because I bought the jockey, not the business plan, because people could pay for a business plan. I always bought the jockey. If I bought the right guy, he made me look like a hero. If I bought the wrong guy, a good guy could even resuscitate and rebuild a company that's really way down. And a bad guy, a bad jockey, could take the best company and drive it into insolvency. So the ones that, I've had cases where the original business plan didn't work out, And fortunately, I had provided them enough funds that they went on and did some. I did one company. I brought it out at 6. It went to about 50, and then it failed. Their technology, their biotechnology failed, and it went back all the way back to 1. And then some inventor came around who had been trying to exploit his patented biotechnology development, and he didn't know how to do it. Inventors don't know how to build businesses. They may be geniuses, but often don't know how. Some do, but most of them don't. So this guy was really a very bright guy, but he was having no success. So I introduced him to this company that was down at $1 and had money left. They gave him. I introduced them. They gave him $100,000 and 5% royalty, and as a result of that, they went back to over 70 because it was called molecular bio, and it was the right jockey. And they, despite the fact that their business plan didn't work, other guys have a business plan and they go down. And I visit with them. I said, "What happened?" And they said, "Well, we followed the business plan." I said, "Yeah, but other people developed better products. Why didn't you change your direction?" And they have to be adaptive. In life, the most important thing is to be adaptive in every aspect of life. So I want them to be adaptive. I want them to be neurotically driven, like I was, in a healthy way, not neurotically driven in an unhealthy way. But, I'll tell you like a cute story. Within a week, I visited, 2 guys visited with me and wanted me to do an IPO. They wanted to go public. The first guy had a business that was doing revenues, maybe $15 million, making a couple of $1 million. But the last 3 years, it was, just the same, up a little, down a little. So I said to him, what happened? Why didn't you grow? You did 15 million 4 years ago, then you did 13 and a half. This year you did 14. Oh, why? He says, look, my business, because your business plan now shows that you're going to really do great. Why should I believe that? So he says, well, the last 3 years I've been having trouble in my marriage, and I spent the last 3 years repairing my marriage, reinvigorating my marriage, and now it's all set, so now I could go to work. So I said, okay, I'll think about it. The same week, another guy came in. He had no business, just an idea. He was going to develop a cell phone. In fact, he said he had developed it already. And he said he made a call from long before the cell phones were, this goes back about 1980 maybe. So he said, I've actually made a call from the middle of a field in Philadelphia to JP Morgan, and it worked. So I came home and told my wife, wow, that's terrific, a guy could do that. She said, yeah, but how come you didn't ask him if he has it, what to show you? Why did he have to tell you about it? So she's much smarter than me. But anyway, why I bought into this guy is he was explaining to me that he works day and night. He never stops working. He works Saturday night, Sunday. He said it got to the point where his wife told him either you stop working like that and spend more time with me, or it's all over the marriage. So he said, he told her it's all over, and he's now, I funded him because for my daughters, I'd rather have they married the first guy who cares about saving the marriage. But for running a company and being dedicated, I did the second guy. He did a company, it was called International Mobile Machines, IMM, and he developed technology supportive of the cell phone. Today, it's a $3 billion company.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing this response and sharing your thoughts about and explaining the concept of funding actually for this very interesting story. So I want to expand on that just a little bit more. So as a leading investor and advisor to the emerging growth companies, you have brought many small cap companies public. You have been investing in companies in the biotech, in healthcare, in education, and you even invested in company that put satellite into space. So what makes a startup eligible for funding it? And how do you spot the small companies that will grow?
Well, it starts off with people calling me or getting in touch with me and saying, Morty, I'd like to come in. I got a great business plan, or a referral. Somebody I'd already took public sends in somebody, has them call me and say, I got a fabulous concept, a fabulous company I'm building, and I'd like to have an appointment. And I always said, I'd love to see you, but I don't want to take your time or mine unless I have a threshold interest. So would you please send me a business plan? So right away, depending on the quality of the business plan, I decide whether I'm going to see them or not. Now, in some cases, I had one case where somebody had paid $75,000 or $100,000 for some brilliant guy to write a really good business plan. I was very impressed. And then when they came in and talking to them and with the top guys, with the founder, I was totally unimpressed. I figured he could never do what this business plan. He could never succeed in implementing this business plan the way it was defined and well defined. So I saw him, but I turned it down. And so over the years, I made better judgments because I met thousands of, before I did 400 companies, I had thousands and thousands of meetings. So but I still made plenty of mistakes. You can't be perfect.
Yes.
But I did many companies that at really startups or very early stages that I funded at low valuations that turned into unicorns, billion-dollar companies. And some of them made a big impact in medicine. In terms of the valuation that I would say to Gen Z generation, I always worked, particularly now, I don't work to make more money because I can't spend the money I have in my lifetime or leave too much to my kids so they don't have incentive to make their own success. So now I'm working to like the Gen Z. I want to make an impact. I want to help people. I want to help people in medicine. And I funded, as Mark said, there's hundreds of doctors now that I have letters from that write to me and said, if not for your funding my initial start at the medical school, I could have never, and it's men, women, blacks, whites, everything, African Americans, Latinos. And I'm so proud of that. It makes me feel so good. And I started locally in my own community here, the best high school in this area. I started a postgraduate college here in this area in my own community. So those are the most rewarding things. People come over to me every day and thank me and say, in this college, they're up all night. The lights are on all night. They're studying and learning. So and also I would tell these young people that even when I started out, the reason I did so many health companies, medical companies, is I always said, if I could cure cancer, I would give away all my money and start all over from scratch. Because cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, my wife's suffering from Parkinson's. Now it's so tragic. And, we spend billions and billions of dollars for defense. I have to give you some frame of reference. During the Second World War, it wasn't called the Defense Department, it was called the War Department. Then they figured that was not a good idea. You don't say somebody dropped dead, you say he passed away. so they found a euphemism. They decided they'll call it a defense department. But half the money at least is offense. They don't have an offense budget. They only have a defense budget. Because no congressman could ever reject defense. But I have to explain that the president, the congressman, all of his family, myself, sadly, every one of us will die not from attack by some foreign terrorists. We're going to die from the same thing that Bush, the father, lost a daughter to cancer, and every one of us loses somebody precious. That's what we should have defense spending for. Spend money on how to get rid of all these horrible diseases that attack us. So I was willing to work for nothing if I could cure these. So I did well. I did good. I did well while I was doing good, and that was the most rewarding part of my life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Morty. You gave us a lot of hope and also definition that impact matters. Is just not about a financial concept, as many countries in Nordic talk about. When I talk to our colleagues in Norway and Denmark and other places, they say we don't pay taxes, we invest in society, we focus on impact. We want to make sure our population is healthy, make sure that we have good infrastructure, good roads, good telecommunications. That's what they are pushing. And so I really love that response, that impact really matters. And when we talk about your career, you were involved in a lot of the technologies and telecommunications specifically. When the world was changing, and it still continues to change in the telecommunications, telco industry, maybe you could share a little bit about some of the successes and the future that you're seeing in telecommunications. And as you're discussing this, it would be great to also build in your positioning, your views on digitalization and AI. How is this going to change the world if hasn't already shifted many things? Satya, the Microsoft's president, said that it took 3 years, so 4 years, to actually create opportunity within the company and create a product adoption. And now this adoption literally happens within weeks and months. So what are your take on some of the companies that will shape the future?
Well, let me start by adding, with respect to Gen Z, I am so impressed with how much smarter they are. Usually we think older people are wiser, but they're so much smarter because they care about the things that matter. They care about the environment, they care about the global warming, they care about taking care of those that are vulnerable. They have good values, as opposed to what we have now with the prevailing view is the main thing is economic growth and bigger profits, and we're compulsive about being, bringing profits. And we say GDP is up, it's fabulous. The market is up, it's fabulous. But in terms of, you mentioned Denmark and all, they do a survey of the happiest countries in the world, and the top 4 out of the top 5 countries are the ones we criticize as being socialist or communist, and they're not. They implement some good ideas. Denmark, Norway, Sweden are 4 of the top 5, and the United States, in terms of happiness, is number 28, I think, last time I looked. So I want to compete to be number 1 for our people, for our humanity, ought to be number 1 in happiness. And instead of GDP, focusing all the time on GDP, I want to focus on GHP, gross happiness product output. That's what I want. So, and AI, it comes along, and I think it's going to have a bigger impact than even the internet, and we know how big that is, or even bigger than the cell phone, bigger than Apple. because even with what it's already doing with robotics, one of my companies introduced robotics into the manufacturing. I visited it. It's unbelievable. It's so much more efficient. The robots never take coffee breaks. They never take time off. They never take vacations. They never go out on strikes or ask for more wages. You don't have to pay Social Security for them. And they produce much more. And if you want, they'll come in weekends and nights, and there's no limit to the hours. So that's just one of the things. And somebody like Google is working with driverless cars with Waymo. That's miracles. When they first invented the drove automobiles, I don't know if you know this, or you're all too young to know it, but in those days, they called cars, all the history up to that 1900 period, early 1900, the only way you could move forward was on maybe a bicycle, or generally an animal, a horse, a camel, or whatever. And then, so when they developed cars, they called them horseless carriages. Horseless carriages. Same with the driverless cars. We have no idea what an impact, and 5G, and most important, what AI helps us to do is come up with solutions and information that it would take us mathematical formulas and research conclusions that it would take us years and years to develop and determine. Maybe never, eons, maybe never. And with AI, we do math problems that take eons and solve them. So it helps for medical research, for developing cures. I wish we'd just divert much of that defense spending to, and unfortunately, sadly, the United States is the biggest provoker of all of the world's artillery, ammunition, things that kill. I don't know if I answered your question, but right now the ones that are leaders in AI are really the same companies that are going up every day. Google, Apple, you guys know better than I do.
Facebook, Microsoft, yeah.
Microsoft, IBM has 8,000 patents related to 8,000 plus patents related to AI.
Yeah, Watson, IBM Watson.
Yeah.
Morty, you just alluded to a lot of the things. So for the audience, what Morty has alluded to is AI market reaching approximately $126 billion. It's just not me saying it. It's the research that the Digital Pioneers Network, in conjunction with major organizations around the world, IDC, Gartner, concluded by 2025, $1 billion of real cash annual worldwide revenue. $4 trillion going to be generated in value in the algorithmic economy, combining AI with all of the innovative technologies. As Morty just alluded, digital workers are coming in, digital workers in nursing centers, human resources, customer care, customer management, and McKinsey and BCG and Accenture are predicting 17 to 19 trillions of value being created, the biggest GDP expansion in the world, more than other countries, equivalent of the GDP growth of the United States. That's how powerful and imminent this is. And you just alluded to companies like Google and Facebook and many of the hot startups. But the question for you is, being very close to New York and at some point living in New York, how can New York, a resilient city, which you grew up and you spent all your lifetime, how can New York and Wall Street specifically now come back and compete against the giants, which are all based in Silicon Valley and other places, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts? How can New York lure the best minds? What could we do?
You know, when Neil Simon moved back to New York Neil Simon is one of the most prolific playwrights. He did Plaza Suite. He did so many great Broadway shows and movies. Neil Simon, and he returned to New York, where he grew up, from L.A. And he said this. He said, L.A. has great weather, 75 to 80 degrees throughout the year, sun, everything beautiful, the beaches, fabulous. But it has three bright, dynamic people. And that was before he left, so that was two after that. He says, New York has innumerable thousands and thousands of really bright, dynamic, leading edge people, you know. He says, and that interaction, that exposure is the most important thing that New York offers. It's like why everybody likes to go to WeWorks, even though WeWorks has not worked out so well for the owners. But the concept of WeWorks, young people love the idea of interacting with their peers, with their bright scientific guys, with you know, guys who have been successful in starting up companies or in the process of starting up companies. So the fact is that the interaction between people, the rubbing off, there's no place more productive and more fruitful than New York. It has its problems, but overall, I never found any place better than New York. When I was at Harvard, I liked Boston because it also develops a lot of great people. It has so many colleges and universities. So a lot of people settle there, but New York it doesn't have to do anything. It's just the best place ever.
Excellent, Morty. Thank you so much for your reply. Well, you're in the Big Apple. I'm in the Mini Apple here in Minneapolis. And, you know, alluding to what you said earlier, it looks like I'm going to have to start calculating some econometric models for this new gross happiness product. So that should be next on the agenda. But in all seriousness, you know, we were just alluding to the connectivity and how young people want to connect with each other. So today's digital age, it provides this very interesting paradox of hyperconnectivity in terms of communication, and there's this instant information abilities. You know, my generation is essentially almost addicted to technology. Everything is an input from a smartphone. Screens are surrounding us 24/7. So with this in mind, what I want to hear is, in the context of the digital age, do you think that this is a big problem? That what's the biggest problem, basically, that plagues our youth when it comes to technology? What concerns you about my generation? And what recommendations do you have to amend these concerns in this hyper-connected digital age, where right now, you know, everything's remote and we're kind of losing this physical connection that we used to have? So I take it on to you.
Listen, Angelica, right? If you're
Angelica.
What?
Angelica is close enough.
Angelica. Yeah. Angelica, if you're an indication of your generation, I got nothing to add. If everybody turns out like you, Mark and Angelina and you and Mark's cohorts are at the leading edge of the future world. You know, you're all brilliant. You're making a big difference. You have good values. I wish you would run the world instead of some of the leaders that we have out there now. And ultimately you will, because you're better, smarter, and you come with values. You know, the value of just more profits and more profits. And if some country has a good idea, you know, when I was young, Roosevelt introduced social security and unemployment insurance. They said he was a communist. Social security was somewhat different in those days because the average lifespan at the beginning of the 20th century, 1900, early 1900, was about 48. And so Roosevelt set up what was called old age insurance. It was not called Social Security. Because in those days, if you got old and you had money, you wound up being homeless on the street, or you went to poorhouses. That was worse than even being on the street homeless. It was devastating. So he said, if you get old and you don't have money, you could get the insurance. What happened, and in those days there was a lockbox, so all the money that you paid in went to a special lockbox that was there for when you retired. Then during Johnson's administration, he put it all together and took it as part of the total proceeds that the government takes in, and there's no lockbox. It's just they'll print money to pay us off. And at that time also, there were maybe 20 workers for everyone that was collecting, maybe more. Today, we're down to 3 workers for everyone because the aging is, and almost nobody lived over 65, So they were paying, like 12 people. I mean, hardly any people. Today, people are living longer, and it was set up at 65. So if you add up all the money that Social Security owes, it's way more than the budget deficit or the debt that we have, that we always discuss. Right now, the debt has gone up to over 100% of GDP for the United States. But what we owe above and beyond, that's not on the books, is a multiple of it. But other countries have good ideas. We should follow them and stop maligning them by, using words like socialist or right now. That's what many of the Republicans or right wingers are saying. If you want to help the vulnerable, you're introducing socialist or communist concepts. We should introduce good ideas. The Chinese are supposedly communists, right? They have more billionaires than the United States. They're more capitalist than any other country. If Mark would turn over in his grave if they told him China was communist. It may be authoritarian, but it's certainly not communist. So we should take good ideas from every country, good values. Since Trump came in, he diminishes science, he minimizes. We should graduate more engineers and more scientists instead of everybody that I talk to is becoming a lawyer. We have more than enough lawyers. We're always busy in court suing each other. It takes up so much time and energy, and sad the values we live with. And capitalism, we have the best form of capitalism, of a government. Even remember what Churchill said. Capitalism is the worst form of government, except compared to all the rest. It really is the best, but it has even the Constitution said we should work towards a more perfect union. We're far from perfect. That should be our aspiration. And it doesn't say life, liberty, and profits, or life, liberty, and GDP growth. It says life, liberty, and happiness. We have to have a way to have the most people happy. They're naive. Rich people are very naive because the more they get, ultimately, it leads to rebellion and overthrow. The French Revolution came as a result of that. All the South American countries, when they have no middle class, all the money goes to the top. And the ones that suffer the most at the end, sometimes they even lose their life in addition to their money. So it's in their own selfish interest. They have the most to lose. They should see that everybody shares and we're like a family. They should, the father takes care of the kids. The ones that do better help out the others. That's a value that we should have. And the young people have it. So, young people have ideals. Sometimes, the old people say, well, they're not realistic. We can't afford it. Anytime they say now about doing more to get us out of this economic malaise, disaster, they're saying we can't afford it. But to give $2 trillion tax cut, most of which went to the people that don't need it. Warren Buffett said, I don't need it. He says, I pay less taxes marginal taxes than my secretary. So the people that are real and that have a sense of community, like Buffett and others, that's what we have to teach everybody to be.
Thank you, Morty, for that guidance regarding the future and also remembering the past, that we have to really focus on caring for the people and providing those economic and social benefits and the system that the future is all inclusive, that you just can't target one versus another. But I want to take us back with a couple of final questions and then go to Angelina in Belgrade to maybe with a final thought, a question as well, and to end this program. But before I do this, I want to talk about, we spoke about socialism, but I want to now take us back to capitalism. And you are one of the believers. You are, of course, an example of true capitalism. And you just mentioned, I think you mentioned here or in other sessions, giving people a check so they could hire people was one of the most rewarding things you have ever done. You believe in investing in younger companies that create our future, that create jobs for others. So how do we take that knowledge and we recreate America? Because America needs more guidance. I think it needs to be recreated in some way because we are divided. Now we are more divided than united. And how do we create all those jobs of the future tomorrow? How do we foster entrepreneurship that you spoke so much about the different programs? And with me, how entrepreneurship becomes a core of everything that is done in the United States. And take you back to the comment, and you brought this book, you alluded to the book that you wrote, and the book is Making America Work Again, not Making America Great Again, Making America Work Again. And Reagan, President Reagan said one of the things that was most remarkable about the book is hardest thing, as you mentioned, is to find hardworking people. Working effectively, you said, is deeply satisfying. Harder you work, the luckier you get. And you were quoted, as you mentioned earlier, by President Ronald Reagan. You mentioned, help a man to get a job. Teach a man how to fish, not give him subsidy. Give him something worthwhile for a lifetime. This is what my parents taught me. This is how you live your life. You stress the importance of education and career today on this call. And we want to get a feeling from you. How do you take this philosophy that you have given to us, that you have given this to our audience, and how do we recreate America for the growth?
Mark, that's why you're great. You encompass all these good things. I was especially impressed with your AI efforts, where you hang out at this company IP Soft, and you actually consult for them on AI. So you're the best role model for what people should, the life they lead. You came from, you're not born here, it doesn't matter. You have better language than most 99% of Americans. You're a kind of miracle, and that's what we should have, role models like you. So just to deal with what the question you asked, which was brilliant. Especially I wanted to point out that I care really about happiness and the happiness of all people, because that's why I wrote this book, Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. How to be happy no matter what. It's 365 days of every single day advice on how to be happy. I sent it to a corporation, a guy who's one of the Fortune 100, and he loves it so much he bought about 200 books. He sends it out as a gift. He says, because every time he sends out thousands of gifts every year, people the first day, some of them are nice enough to thank him, others don't even say anything. But during the year when they use it, they don't even remember who gave it to them. He says with this book, he reads a page every day now, and he walked over to the TV with his wife and two boys watching. He turned it off, and they said, Dad, don't do that. That's our favorite program. He said, I want you to listen to it. Something, I read them one page, and now he said it's become a ritual. He reads them a page every single day, and he says it's the best thing. In terms of the question about do you give a man a check, I don't believe in that. As a matter of fact, I believe if you give a man a check or food, you feed him for one day. And if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So I'm writing a book now, What Would You Do If You Were King? And one of the things I advocate is that nobody should get a check unless they're incapable of working. If they're, sick or unhealthy or what's the word, invalid, then we're a rich enough country that we could take care of those people. But everybody else, there should be, worst case, if somebody gets laid off, they could get 6 weeks unemployment. That's all. And if we offer them a job in infrastructure. Now, if a guy is at Goldman Sachs, he doesn't want a job in infrastructure, to laying bricks or putting tar on the roads or anything like that. But we need planners to plan the things. We need supervisors. So we tell them, look, you want time off and no work, that's your prerogative. But if you want to check, you got to go to work. And everybody has to do work, because we got enough work, as you know, to keep all our people busy for the next 50 years. And that would improve the quality of all our lives. Every day that people sit on the roads aggravating, stuck in traffic, so much waste and truck drivers being caught up in traffic. The sewer system, water systems, building schools, building affordable housing, building a superior grid. All of those things would improve our life and be tangible results from the great thing that China did is they built super cities before we get approvals in this country. And that's why they're way ahead of us, and they keep everybody employed building. And now when it slows down, they do more infrastructure. That's so invaluable, and that would change our life for the better. And it means that it would be a great place to teach young people. Look, when a young guy goes to work, when I wanted to go to work, the first thing they asked me is, you have any experience? I said, no, this is my first job. They say, well, come back when you get some experience. So it's a catch-22. You can't get a job unless you have experience, and you can't get experience unless you have a job. So this would be a stepping stone for retraining people to be plumbers and bricklayers and road builders, and teach them engineering, teach them all the different valuable trades. That's what we should do. We got enough work. We don't have to put up. We should be delighted that we have a balance of payments with China. Let them build all the crap that we don't need to build. And we could build our country. We could create domestic jobs that improve our life while they're building the things that wear out. That's investment. When you build an infrastructure, you're building not consumables. I don't know if you agree, but that's my strong view. There's no reason why we can't keep everybody fully employed. We'd be more productive.
Thank you. We agree, and that this is one of the ways to recreate America. I want to pass this to Angelina for final insight, maybe a short, brief question, and then we close out the session.
Absolutely. I want to come back to the future of work, because he shared Morty, you shared a lot of interesting insights on that. You stated once that 80% of all new jobs are created by the companies that have been in business for less than 5 years. And with all these new technologies emerging every day, we've seen many new jobs that would have never been possible decades ago, invented and created by the startups. You yourself have created thousands of new jobs just by founding these companies. So in your opinion, how has the startup space changed over the years, and how can new companies use these new technologies to their advance?
Well, you can't do what I did anymore, which was public venture capital, because we were able to have brokers that support the market as the company was developing. So our brokers would keep the clients informed as to the progress. Biotech companies are not making any money. So if you bring it out and there's no brokers talking about it and selling there's always people that want to sell. Either they need the money for some urgent need, or they just they're fed up with waiting for the stock to move. So there's always sellers. So you have to absorb the sellers and keep the stock up so that you could do more deals in the future. So you can't do that anymore because they eliminated the spread between the bid and ask. Now it's a penny. So we can't pay the brokers anything. So all the brokers now they do is bring in money for the firm to manage, and they get a commission on the override on what they charge the client for managing the money. So unfortunately, let me tell you the difference. When I used to give a guy a check at the closing after we did his IPO, the minute I hand him the check, not a year later, not a month later, not a day later, actually maybe a day later, the next day, he was out buying capital equipment to build his company and hiring people. That's true capitalism. That's what we got to get back to. They're doing it through our crowd and so forth. And hopefully, because the people that I sold it to were Main Street average investors and middle class people. And some of them made one guy told me, I sold him a stock called Enzo Biochem, and it went way up. And he always, when he meets me, he says, my house is the house that Enzo built, because he made so much money buying that stock and selling. So it's great for society. We have to find a way. Actually, I induced Bill Clinton and Secretary of Treasury Bob Rubin and Congress to pass a bill. It's a stealth bill because very few accountants know about it, that if you invest in a small company, they made it even bigger. I didn't want it that big. It's got less than 50 million in assets or market cap. If you invest at the early stage and not bonds or just equity, and if you keep it and hold it for more than 6 months, when you sell it, you never have to pay a tax. If you reinvest, this is the negative. If you reinvest within 2 months, it's hard to find a new investment within 2 months. For real entrepreneurs, what they do is they start another company, and they could invest it in their own new startup. So that's a way to trigger and incentivize starting more new companies. But at the same time, I handed the guy a check once, and he was out the next day hiring people. AT&T did a $2 billion offering, and they used the $2 billion to pay off employees to leave and to buy back shares in the open market. They don't use it the same way. So 80% of the new jobs come from new companies, early stage companies. The guy at the patent office, the commissioner of the patent office in 1898, said that they should close down the patent office because all the inventions that will ever be developed have already been developed. And so there's no further use for the patent office. Could you believe that? In 1898, he said that. I think we had a few inventions since then.
Not so inventive, yeah.
Then they asked Marshall Falk, professor of strategy at the École Supérieure de Guerre, if the airplanes are real, if that'll ever happen. And he says airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value. They had such surprising narrow vision, and these are the most brilliant people. The Western Union said when they told them about the telephone, this telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. You believe that?
Even geniuses can get it wrong.
Tell that to Apple. And then Lord Kelvin, the president of the Royal Society in 1895, insisted heavier than air flying machines are impossible. It's impossible, you know. David Sarnoff, the founder of RCA and NBC, asserted that the radio, you know, that box that talks has no imaginable commercial value. He said, who would listen or pay for a message, a talk, to nobody in particular? So he was right too. And then they told, what's his name, Harry Warner, who built the Warner Studios. At that time, this goes back 1927, where silent films were the only films that were out there. And many more people went to the movies in those days than do today. Millions every day. And then he said that when they told them we want to have talking actors talk, he said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? So this is just a small number of them, but it's just amazing that people that are supposedly brilliant can't believe it. You know, old people have a gestalt. They see the way it's done and they say, that's the way it's done. It can't be different. And young people get it done because they don't know it can't be done. So that's the marvelous thing about young people. All you Gen Z people, you're going to change the world. Mark's going to change the world. Angelica's going to change the world. And Angelina change the world. You guys are making the biggest difference. God bless you. And you're going to improve the nature of life as long as you have they're underlined with good aspirations and goals. And that's
Thank you. Thank you very much, Morty, for this positive message.
Let me finish up with one small joke about two guys are retiring. Two old guys are retiring from a business, and they say, who should we turn over the business to? So one of them says to the other one, why don't we turn it over to my son? He says, my son, are you crazy? Wait, I'll show you how dumb he is. He calls him in. Son, here's $10. Go buy me a new car. With that, the kid takes the $10 and runs out. So he says to his partner, he says, let's turn it over to your son. He said, my son, you think your son is done? Wait, I'll call him my son. Son, run down the corner to the barber shop and see if I'm there. And with that, the son runs out. And of course, the two sons run into each other. The first son says, you know how dumb my father is? He gives me money to buy him a car. He doesn't tell me what color, what kind of car, what make, what. He says, you think your father's dumb? He says, my father says, run down the corner to the barbershop to see if I'm there. He could have called up.
Incredible. What an incredible story. So, you know, it's about not your idea. Your point is you have to be wise. You have to be smart. You have to just not focus. You have to be really wise. And being wise and smart is very important. There are valuable lessons here today, Morty, that you have given us and our audience and your precious time. And we're very thankful for this. I want to pass this to Angelica for a closing statement. And we end this recording. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Morty. It was a true pleasure to have you today and to learn from a true living legend, everything from your background in investment banking, all of the recommendations that you have for Generation Z, how artificial intelligence and digital transformation will change the world, and really pushing the importance of a social impact and sustainability-driven approach. And I have no doubt that somebody like you echoing this message is going to reach all over the world as we disseminate this broadcast to our audience. So again, we thank you so much for joining us today, and it was a true pleasure.
You and Angelina too, and then Mark are all so brilliant, and you have such beauty. You know, anything you want to sell, I'm a buyer.
God bless you. Thank you so much. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Hello.